Om Shanti. I remember when I was a child growing up, I saw this film which was called Harvey the White Rabbit, and it was this man's invisible friend, and this invisible friend went around with him wherever he went, and obviously he was his very best friend, and he kind of didn't need anything other than his invisible friend. And he told people about his invisible friend, and they offered him psychiatric help, and various authorities came out to analyse his state of mind. And to cut a long story short, the way the film ended was that the invisible friend, called Harvey the White Rabbit, which was about 6'6" tall, turned out to be real. And it's just that everyone else didn't believe it, but he was the only one. And normally we go by the belief of the majority, and we listen to people that are in the numbers. And if there's a few numbers, we tend to look on them as cranks or crackpots. But whilst growing up, I always wanted that invisible friend to be with me, to take any problems off me throughout my everyday life, and everyone should have that invisible friend. Unfortunately, once they got hold of the word God, God, it became less of a fairy tale stroke reality, as more as of a religious concept. And to me it was always that I had to have the experience of a supreme being or a almighty authority that was friendly, kind, warm, loving. I could never accept the angry God, the malicious God, the jealous God, as they say, because that would put him in the same category as human beings. And why would human beings want to find more of the same of themselves? They would actually want to find a being that is filled with love, filled with patience, filled with inspirational narrative, so that the soul can feel secure, because one of the main reasons why there's so much sorrow is insecurity, needing someone that instills faith and belief inside of themselves and a healthy future as well. So it would also have these qualities. So at first, I guess everyone is just taking it on face value that a supreme being or a superior being does exist. And we're actually starting at that point rather than the negative, where someone has a very negative attitude towards a supreme being and just believes in once you're dead, which is, there's no spiritual direction, there's no spiritual investigation going on because the door's shut. And there's one thing about a salesman is that they can't sell their wares with a firm no from the reciprocator. As soon as that no is, the door shut, as soon as that no is in place. And so we needed this kind of open-mindedness on self-discovery, so that the self can discover the self and can also discover the experience of a supreme being that is always there for you no matter what, and it's the same one for everyone basically, rather than there being so many of them, because this very much creates a lot of conflict, confusion, debates, and even violence in some extents, because a lot of the religious wars, and I guess we've reached a point where the more religious someone is, the more irreligious or immoral they become. So we needed a guiding light, really, to actually offer us that company, that presence, so that our own morality was boosted and our own insecurity dissolved, so that there's fearlessness where there was fear, so that there's faith where there was doubt, so that there's love where there was anger. And all these things have opposites because it's all going on inside the eternal soul. So it's a spiritual thing. If someone becomes much more angry, then they're less loving. And if they're more loving, they're less angry. So it's all according to an energy, really, an energy that can't be seen with the physical eyes, can only be seen with the third eye. So when we talk about a Supreme Being, we can't actually uncover the mysteries and the secrets of a Supreme Being until we understand the self and the self's true nature, so that we go inward rather than outward, so that we become introspective rather than extrovert. And one thing's for sure, that mankind hasn't got the answers, because if he had the answers, then everyone would be getting these experiences. And you're reminded in religion to keep your faith. And the reason why you have to keep keeping your faith is because the faith isn't secure. And if it's not secure, then there's not enough experiences. You couldn't tell a chemistry teacher, biology teacher, or science teacher who's had years of experience that he wasn't capable of teaching, because he's experienced that again and again. So experience and attainment is everything, really. If one was to have visions, well, people do have visions, but it doesn't actually change the consciousness, because if a vision changed the consciousness, then it may change the direction, but it doesn't actually change the consciousness from where a person's at in their life to a different state of consciousness. And when we're talking about a different state of consciousness, we're talking about away from the physical, because we're talking about spiritual. So away from the physical and to the spiritual, so that the spiritual is actually being felt, experienced, and that becomes a form of being seen. It becomes very clear that you are that once that experience starts happening. So when we talk about that the soul, the self, is peace, the body is like a rubber stopper, if you like, an insulation that stops the connection with the Supreme Being, the Source. The Supreme Being, which means a bodiless. The difference between the human soul and the Supreme Soul is that the human soul has a human form, and the Supreme Soul doesn't have any form apart from the form of the soul, which is the point of light, which is above this one's head, the same form as our own, but because we've become body conscious, 5 vices started to emerge from that consciousness of the body. So the body is just a costume, a sheath, an instrument that we use. And we were never meant to get to the point where the I and my of our whole life is connected to the body, and the my of the material possessions, status and position and wealth and property, etc., etc. And this is what people tend to fight over. whether it be to do with money, whether it be to do with their looks and someone else's looks, where they're actually trying to decorate the body, they're actually trying to decorate the soul, because it's the soul that feels everything, it's the soul that tastes, it's the soul that sees, it's the soul that listens, it's the soul that speaks, and it's the soul that smells, the soul that touches. So all these 5 sense organs of the body were meant to be used by the user, but the user lost his awareness to the used, and so we became caught up emotionally in what we see, what we hear, even sometimes with our emotions of what we say. Sometimes things that are said are out of control, where they seem to just come out because the soul hasn't learned to be in touch with themselves. Because when you're in touch with yourself, this is under control. These are under control. So if you choose not to see, you can put your mind elsewhere, because the mind, which is a spiritual organ, both the mind and intellect are spiritual organs, and if I choose not to see, not to be absorbed, then I can become the observer to other people's roles, and that means no negative energy is going in. So the body and body consciousness is like the rubber stopper that stops the connection with the source of peace, the source of love, the source of light, the source of divinity, the source of purity, the truth, basically. And the reason why he's the truth is because he doesn't come into a cycle of birth and death. He stays always powerful, ever powerful, which enables him to recharge the soul. But the soul still has to do his bit, the human soul still have to do his bit. I've still got to put the time and energy in turning my mind towards the Supreme Being. On the one side you get people talking about the jealous God, the angry God, the righteous indignation which they said that Christ has had, and wherever there's justification for a negative, it still remains a negative. Doesn't matter how much people try to go against their own true nature, which is peace, love, compassion and understanding. The more they go against it, however much they justify it, they become worse in their characteristics. So they allow the anger to rule them, they allow the ego to rule them, they allow the greed to rule them, they allow jealousy, which is a side effect of all the other vices, because if you don't have any worldly materialistic ways, then what is there to be jealous about? So jealousy is one of those progenies really of these main 5 vices, namely lust, ego, anger, greed and attachment. And basically the Supreme Being hasn't got any of those. He remains quiet, he remains patient, he remains peaceful, he also remains alert in the sense of ever ready with that power, not an ever ready as we know, an alertness waiting for a phone call for the phone to ring, not like that kind of an alertness, but his powers are always intact, and therefore they always have that impact, and they're always ever ready to serve the human soul, because his vision is different to the human soul's. The vision of the human soul will become distasteful and full of disdain if someone does bad actions, speaks bad words, even thinks bad thoughts, thinks negatively of someone else. If people knew that in their relationships, if we was to speak what we actually think, there probably wouldn't be any relationships left, because that's all hovering inside, and that comes out because the truth always outs. Whatever's a person's feeling will eventually come out. Excuse me. So we basically had an identity crisis whereby the soul, the human soul, has lost its identity to the body, and by identifying with, the invisible friend, Harvey the White Rabbit, but in this case it's the Supreme Being, by being bodiless, separate to the body. As soon as you're separate to the body, and you experience yourself to be the being of light here at the centre of the forehead, then there's no past, there's no future, there's only the now. You wouldn't have to try to live in the now. You experience the presence of yourself. So the attainment is first and the now is second. Otherwise, what point is there in now? Because it's not that interesting, really, because yourself is missing. But if yourself is bursting through the now with your true nature of light, love, peace, compassion, understanding, then turning your mind towards the Supreme Soul changes our limited powers to an unlimited state. So that unlimited state basically means that we do have tolerance, but it's not unlimited. We do have patience, but it's not right to the 100% mark. We do have love, but it's selective. It can run out. It can be full on one moment, and the next moment completely switched off, because it's a very emotional and unstable love. So what you're recapturing really is the same consciousness as the Supreme, where soul consciousness becomes God consciousness, where you and your friend, like friends do, and the more they stay with each other, the more they hang out, as we say. In this sense, it's hanging out up there, hanging out together, the more affected we become. And we need to be affected because we're infected, basically. We need to be affected by the Supreme Being's presence, and that comes through remembrance of one and one alone. So when we say one, we're forgetting, we're putting a full stop on everything else of the outside world. We're switching off to switch on. And this switching on is a very delightful state of supreme experiences and attainment. In other words, the Father has a lot of special feelings for the child. So he's the Father in the sense of there's no physical form, but there's a Father in the sense of he's giving this qualities that we inherit from him. And the human soul basically remembers those qualities that were once inherited before, because we only really remember God when we're in a state of sorrow. And how many people, if you jump out on them, say, oh my God, and it's not happening in the physical body, it's happening in the soul, because the soul has an inbuilt memory that the Supreme Being gave us something many thousands of years ago, and we lost it, mislaid it, blew it, if you like. We were trusted with it, we were custodians of it, and all of a sudden we became poverty-stricken. Poverty-stricken is not a state of no wealth, it's a state of no spiritual health. So that means a very emotionally disturbed things happen and there's an emotional disturbance goes on, and it goes on in the soul. And the more the mind is remembering the Supreme Being, you can just focus on this point and absorb the qualities that are coming, the magnificent love, the magnificent peace, the magnificent sweetness, the magnificent strength of the Supreme Being. So your mind is the absorber. Basically, the intellect knows and the mind does what it's told. It absorbs those qualities into itself. And whenever we've had exhibitions for the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University, there's been this, when they've seen the Supreme Soul's picture as a point of light with all these rays coming from it, they stop and stare at this thing. It catches their eye because there's a twinkling in the back of the mind that takes place, a recognition takes place of a distant memory, because the soul never loses its memories. It's always got them in the bank. That's why we call it a memory bank. And it's a bank that never runs out of wealth, and it never runs out of the memory of how to regather that wealth as well. And something very informative happens when the soul connects with the Supreme Soul, because it triggers off a memory that really this is what I was looking for. This is the one that I was looking for. The one that is invisible is now visible to me. That means my mind's eye, not the physical eyes, but the mind's eye is now seeing the Supreme Being and absorbing itself in that beauty. Many people have had out-of-body experiences of the Supreme Soul, and they experience it in the sense of unutterable bliss and a love that they've never experienced before, and years later they can still taste that love. So that love is incredulous and magnificent. We can use all the words we use to exaggerate things, like, the coronavirus being so terrible, the fuel shortages being so awful, what a terrible situation. But use that same form with the Supreme Being, and those qualities start to become unlocked, and they start to be passed down from father to child, so that your friend is now your father as well, because you inherit something from him. The sustenance of the mother comes about because you would keep getting pulled, when you're at your office or your manual work and you're working, even when you suddenly switch off the TV and there's that moment of silence, all of a sudden the mother's role will start to have an effect where because God's got no gender, she starts pulling you in such a way that you feel like you're with a mother and father, just like a child really who immediately sees his mother and father, he runs to them for that security. It's a bit different from the security of the physical parents, because just like we've got physical parents in the sense of every life, we have different parents, but this is the eternal parents that are always your parents forever, that never changes. And the only reason we think of that being is when we have that need, when we're suffering, when there's sorrow. We don't remember God in happiness, we remember God when there's sorrow, and that's why we say, oh God, help us out of our dilemma, and so on. And so the security is very much different in the form of the Supreme Parents, because it's an insecurity that melts away. The security melts the insecurity. I remember very much as a child when I had security from my parents, but I still carried insecurity. So as I grew up, I knew I couldn't always call on my physical mother and father, but in the spiritual one you can. So whenever there's any insecurity, just remember God, remember the Supreme Being, or a nicer terminology than that is Baba. Everyone should have their Baba. He's your Baba, he's my Baba. So we say from the inner core, the heart, my Baba, and the fear and the insecurity will just melt away, and you'll wonder where that went and how that came about, because you can't see any evidence. There's no DNA, there's no forensic evidence of it, not even a trace. It's completely vanished, and that happens as soon as you decide, because it's still your part, your role to do this, to switch off from the situation and switch on to the Supreme Being. Switch off, switch on. We've done it the opposite way round. We've been switching off to God and switching on to the disturbance, and then these sense organs have been used to expand on something negative that's affecting the person, the soul. And what happens is the vibration magnifies, so that the energy becomes bigger than us as a feeling. And in reality, your self-respect is that nothing is bigger than your self-respect. It's you that made it big, it's you that can make it small, but you must switch off and switch on. So you connect to the source and reconnect until the line's secure, because as soon as we come into the consciousness of the body, we break the line again. So we break and then make. We have to keep making when it keeps breaking. Don't become disheartened, because love is always a greater attraction. It's feels much nicer to love than to not love, or to hate, to dislike. And so love melts the hate, the opposites melts the opposite. So love melts hate, love melts anger, love melts fear, self-respect, gets rid of the ego, pure desire to remember that being and to be with that being melts all the impure desires. One desire to be with that one changes all the desires. You stop wasting money, stop spending money, stop trying to make money a form or a source of happiness, because it isn't. If anything, it's a source of sorrow. So it's not money's fault. Money's meant to be there. Money's an energy, and the more you connect with the source, the more the money will take care of itself. The more the matter takes care of itself. When you get the wealth from the Supreme Being, which is your entitlement, your right as a child, then that wealth becomes has an effect on the wealth of the material. When you feel good about yourself, your feel-good factor is good. That's your spiritual health. Your feel-good factor, then the health of the body will start looking after itself. So you won't have to run around getting all the vitamins and nutrients you need, because the physical body's cells are experiencing the love that you're processing, and they're open and they'll absorb any nutrients that are there. Just like these orchids, really. The orchid flower is quite unique, because just the condensation in a room, and it's as good as watered, because it takes whatever's there. And that's what you're doing now. So you don't need to force feed yourself with these vitamins. It's good to have a clean diet, Don't harm the animals. They haven't done anything to you. Leave them alone. They're your friends. and you shouldn't be eating your friends. Meat has an effect on the mind of a negative nature, so that will make you absorb all the vibrations of the animal that you're eating, and you'll have to make an added effort to actually connect with Baba, the Supreme Being. So, as they say, if all the trees were changed to quills, and all the seas were changed to ink, and all the land was changed to paper, you couldn't write down his qualities because they're too magnificent, they're a good place to explore. They're like a garden of flowers, of all these virtues and all this beauty that's in the Supreme Being. He is not going to come down and say, look how wonderful I am. That's what human beings do. He's going to come down and say, look how wonderful my children are. Your only crime was to become body conscious, to become matter conscious, and all the vices of negativity kicked in from there. So we'll do some meditation, done a good half an hour on this subject. So we'll do some meditation, and I say Om Shanti. So turning within, and becoming aware of the self as light within the center of the forehead, letting go of the body, let go, and let go again, and take your mind far away, far away from the material dimension, the body and relationships of the body. Take your mind with wings of light to a dimension of light far beyond the material cosmos, a place called Nirvana, Paramdham, is the home of the soul, and that's where our Baba, your Baba, my Baba resides. Be in the presence of a point of divine light, the Father of the soul. See the qualities, feel the qualities of this source of magnificence, light and might penetrating your mind, removing all the vestiges, all the memory tracks that are filled with sorrow are being cleaned out. See yourself as a shining star of light, becoming brighter, cleaner, like the Father. The Father's presence is your present. your gift of life, your gift of love, the gift to make you sparkle and beautiful once more. And like a star in front of the sun, you're reflecting that light to not just your friends and relations, but to Mother Earth. Experience yourself to be an instrument, like an angel of light that reflects and deflects the light to your brothers and sisters on the world stage who are stumbling around in costumes, looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. And you have now found the invisible one is now visible, and your old self that was corrupted has now been found, brought to the foreground of your mind, and your old self with all those negative traits are in the background. Make the foreground brighter, lighter, whiter, and full of divinity. Remember, you can say, "My Baba," wherever you are, whatever situation you're in. Make him your Baba. Be possessive, be attached to your Baba, and all the threads, ropes and chains of all the attachments to the world down below will break. They will experience a love coming from you that they have never experienced before. Om Shanti.